The waves churned violently, swallowing the desperate screams of a little boy. His tiny arms flailed, barely breaking the surface before vanishing again. The ocean was pulling him under. Sophia's heart slammed against her ribs. She was halfway through her morning run along the shore when she spotted him, helpless, sinking. The people around didn't move. Some gasped, some pointed, but no one jumped in. She didn't think. She ran. Cold water wrapped around her legs as she charged into the waves. The current was stronger than she expected. It yanked at her, dragging her sideways, but she pushed forward. "Hold on," she shouted, though the boy couldn't hear her. Another wave crashed over him. He went under. No, no, no. Sophia dove, the salty sting of seawater burning her eyes. Darkness swallowed her. For a terrifying moment, she saw nothing. Then, movement, tiny bubbles rising. She reached out, fingers brushing against his small, limp body. Got him. She yanked him toward her and kicked hard, pushing toward the surface. The boy coughed, sputtering as his head broke free from the water. His eyes were wide, filled with terror. "It's okay, I got you," she gasped, wrapping an arm around him. The shore felt miles away, but she focused on kicking, pushing forward against the relentless tide. Her arms ached, her lungs burned, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. After what felt like an eternity, the ocean finally released its grip. She staggered onto the shore, her legs trembling. The boy was coughing, sucking in deep, ragged breaths. A woman rushed toward them, screaming, "My baby!" The mother dropped to her knees, grabbing the boy and holding him so tightly that he whimpered. Sophia stepped back, breathing hard, her soaked clothes clinging to her body. A small crowd had gathered, murmuring, pointing, whispering. She just jumped in without thinking. That was incredible. She saved him. The boy's mother turned to Sophia, eyes brimming with tears. I don't know how to thank you." Her voice trembled. "You saved my son's life." Sophia forced a smile, still catching her breath. I did what anyone would do." But that wasn't true. No one else had moved. They had just watched. Then, out of the crowd, a man stepped forward. Unlike the others, he wasn't smiling. He wasn't relieved. He looked pale, almost sick. His dark eyes locked onto hers. "You shouldn't have done that." The warmth of gratitude around her disappeared. Sophia frowned. "What?" The man shook his head, glancing at the boy, then back at her. His face was unreadable, but there was something in his expression that sent a chill down her spine. "Fear." She swallowed. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer. He turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Sophia standing there, shivering, not from the cold, but from the nagging sense that something was very, very wrong. The warning. Later that evening, Sophia couldn't shake the encounter. She had gone home, showered, and changed, but the man's words still echoed in her head. "You shouldn't have done that." Why? Her phone buzzed. A message from her best friend, Mia. "Mia, you're all over the news." Sophia blinked. News? She tapped on the link Mia sent, and sure enough, a video had surfaced. Someone had recorded the rescue. It had already gained thousands of views. Sophia watched herself wade into the ocean, the waves crashing against her as she dove under. The camera shook as the person filming gasped when she resurfaced with the boy. She should have felt proud. Instead, she felt uneasy. Her phone buzzed again. "Mia, people are calling you a hero. Are you okay?" Sophia hesitated before typing back. "Sophia, yeah, just tired." It was scary. That was an understatement. She set her phone down, but sleep didn't come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the boy sinking. And worse, she saw the man's face. You shouldn't have done that. Why had he looked so afraid? A stranger in the dark. The next morning, Sophia stepped outside to grab coffee. The air was crisp, the sun barely rising over the horizon. She yawned, still feeling the exhaustion from yesterday. As she walked down the quiet street, she felt it. Someone was watching her. Her pace slowed. She glanced over her shoulder. No one. Shaking off the feeling, she reached the cafe and stepped inside. The warmth of fresh coffee and pastries filled the air. She ordered her usual and waited by the counter. Then, she saw him. The man from the beach. He was sitting by the window, staring at her. Sophia's breath hitched. He was real. She wasn't imagining it. Their eyes met, and for a second, he looked like he might stand up. But then, just as quickly, he turned his gaze away. Sophia hesitated. Should she confront him? Ask him what he meant? Her order was called. By the time she turned back, he was gone. The truth begins to unravel. That night, Sophia couldn't ignore it anymore. She needed answers. She pulled up the news article again. The boy's name was Ethan Carter. His mother, Lisa Carter, had spoken briefly to reporters, thanking everyone for their support. Sophia scrolled down, then stopped. There was a comment. Just one. Anonymous, you should have let him drown. Sophia's heart pounded, who would say that? She clicked the profile. It was empty, no name, no photo, nothing. She swallowed hard, a sick feeling curling in her stomach. Something wasn't right. A knock at the door. A knock at the door made her jump. Her apartment was silent. It was nearly midnight. Who would be here at this hour? Slowly, she walked to the door. Peering through the peephole, her stomach dropped. The man. He stood there, expression unreadable. Sophia's heart pounded. Every instinct screamed at her not to open it. Then, he spoke, his voice muffled through the door. I know what you did. Sophia's breath caught. What? Her fingers hovered over the lock. A long pause. Then, he said something that sent ice through her veins. Sophia's hand trembled on the doorknob. The man's words echoed in her head. That boy, he wasn't supposed to survive. A chill spread through her chest. Who was this man? Why was he saying such things? She swallowed hard. Who are you? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. No answer. She stood frozen, waiting, listening. The hallway outside was silent, but she knew he was still there. Then, his voice came again, softer this time. Please. Open the door. You don't understand what you've done. Sophia clenched her jaw. Every instinct screamed at her to walk away, to pretend this wasn't happening. But she had to know. Slowly, she unlocked the door. Just a crack. The man's face was pale under the dim hallway light. Up close, his eyes weren't just dark, they were haunted. I don't have much time, he said. You need to listen carefully. Sophia hesitated, but something about his urgency made her step back and open the door wider. The man entered quickly, shutting the door behind him. He stood near the entrance, tense, as if expecting someone to barge in at any second. Sophia crossed her arms. Talk. The man ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. You shouldn't have saved that boy. Sophia's stomach twisted. Are you insane? He was drowning. I had to. The man nodded as if he expected her to say that. I know. But you don't understand who he is. Sophia's pulse quickened. He's just a kid. The man shook his head. No. He's not. A heavy silence filled the room. Sophia stared at him. You're not making any sense. He sighed, rubbing his temples. I don't expect you to believe me. But I have proof. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, and then turned the screen toward her. Sophia leaned in. A blurry image appeared. It looked like an old news article, but the text was hard to read. She squinted. Then her breath caught. A headline. Carter family tragedy, 5-year-old Ethan missing, presumed dead. Sophia's hands went cold. This can't be real. The man nodded grimly. Look at the date. Sophia's eyes darted to the top corner of the article. Dated, 7 years ago. Her heart slammed against her ribs. No. That didn't make sense. The boy she saved was no older than 6. She looked up at the man, her voice barely a whisper. That's impossible. He locked eyes with her. I wish it was. The boy who shouldn't exist. Sophia shook her head. This has to be a mistake. Maybe the family had another son. The man let out a bitter laugh. No. Ethan Carter was their only child. He drowned in a lake 7 years ago. They never found his body. Sophia stared at him, struggling to breathe. But I pulled him out of the water. I saw him. The man nodded. I know. A heavy silence fell between them. Then Sophia whispered the only question that mattered. What is he? The man hesitated. Then, in a low voice, he said, something that shouldn't be here. A shiver ran down Sophia's spine. She grabbed the man's arm. Who are you? How do you know all this? He hesitated before answering. My name is Daniel. I used to be a journalist. I covered the Carter case years ago. Sophia narrowed her eyes. And now you're here? Watching me? Daniel exhaled. Because I knew this would happen. I just didn't know when. Sophia swallowed. You knew he would come back? Daniel nodded. And I know what happens next. Sophia took a step back. What happens next? Daniel's voice was grim. People start dying. The Watchers. A heavy silence filled the room. Sophia's mind raced. This was insane. A missing boy, a drowning that shouldn't have happened, and now this stranger claiming people were going to die. She took a deep breath. You need to leave. Daniel's eyes darkened. You think I'm lying? Sophia hesitated. I think you're scaring me, and I don't know why I'm still listening. Daniel sighed. I get it. You think I'm crazy. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper. This is for you. Read it. Then decide. Sophia frowned but took the paper. Daniel turned toward the door. Lock this behind me. Then, without another word, he left. Sophia bolted the door and leaned against it, exhaling sharply. Her hands shook as she unfolded the paper. Her breath caught. It was another old article. Mysterious deaths follow Carter family tragedy. Below, 3 names were listed. Detective Mark Lively, found dead in his apartment. Cause, suicide. Sarah Jensen, reporter covering the case. Killed in a hit-and-run. Dr. Howard Finch, the medical examiner who reviewed the case. Died in a house fire. Sophia's stomach twisted. This wasn't a coincidence. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Don't look into this. Walk away. This is your only warning. Sophia's blood ran cold. Someone was watching her. She turned off the lights, heart hammering, and peeked through the blinds. Across the street, under a flickering streetlight, stood a shadowy figure. Just standing. Watching. Sophia's fingers tightened around the paper. She had a choice. Walk away, or find out the truth. She already knew what she was going to do. Sophia's fingers trembled as she gripped the curtain, her eyes locked on the figure across the street. The person didn't move. Did they see her looking? Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Put the paper down. Forget the boy. This is your last chance. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. She backed away from the window, pulse hammering. Whoever sent that text knew exactly what she was doing. She forced herself to breathe, to think. She had two choices: call the police or call Daniel. She reached for her phone, hesitated, then dialed Daniel. The call rang once. Twice. Then. Don't talk. Just listen. His voice was urgent. Sophia's grip tightened. Daniel, someone is outside my house. Silence. Then. Lock your doors. Turn off the lights. And don't. A sharp static noise cut through the call. Then the line went dead. Sophia yanked the phone from her ear, staring at the screen. No signal. A chill ran down her spine. She wasn't alone. The intruder. Sophia moved quickly, turning off the last light in her apartment. Darkness swallowed the room. She pressed her back against the wall, breathing shallow. Something felt wrong. A shift in the air. A presence. Then. A creak. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The sound came from inside. She wasn't alone in the apartment. Her eyes darted toward the kitchen. She had left the back door locked, right? She grabbed a heavy candle holder from the table, gripping it tightly. Another creak. Closer this time. Someone was inside. She held her breath, straining to listen. A slow, deliberate movement. Then. A shadow passed the hallway. Sophia's throat tightened. Whoever it was, they weren't rushing. They were waiting. She pressed herself further into the darkness, her pulse pounding in her ears. Another step. Then. A whisper. You shouldn't have saved him. Sophia's blood turned to ice. The voice was right behind her. She spun around, swinging the candle holder with all her strength. It hit nothing. The empty air swallowed her movement. She stumbled back, chest heaving. There was no one there. Then she saw it. A message. Scrawled on her living room mirror. He knows you now. Sophia's legs nearly gave out. The words weren't written in ink. They were written in water. The missing files. Sophia didn't sleep. She sat curled on the couch, gripping her phone, waiting for a signal to return. By dawn, bars flickered back onto the screen. She called Daniel. He picked up on the first ring. Sophia? I need to see you. Now. Daniel didn't ask why. He only said, meet me at my place. Bring the article. She grabbed the paper and rushed out the door. 20 minutes later, she knocked on Daniel's apartment door. He yanked it open, pulling her inside. You okay? He asked, scanning her face. No, she said, breathless. Someone was in my apartment last night. Daniel's jaw tightened. Did they hurt you? No. But they left a message. She hesitated. On my mirror. Daniel frowned. What did it say? Sophia swallowed. He knows you now. Daniel's face drained of color. He ran a hand through his hair. Damn it. Sophia slammed the paper onto his table. Tell me everything. No more cryptic warnings. What's happening? Daniel sat down heavily. I was hoping you wouldn't get pulled into this. But it's too late now. He pulled open his laptop, fingers moving quickly. You need to see something. Sophia leaned over, watching as he typed. A news archive page loaded. Daniel searched Ethan Carter case. A list of articles popped up. He clicked the top one. The same article he had shown her before. Carter family tragedy, 5-year-old Ethan missing, presumed dead. But something was different. Sophia frowned. Wait, that's not the same article you showed me yesterday. Daniel's face was grim. No. It's not. The original article was gone. Replaced. Edited. The new version said Ethan's body was found. That he had drowned 7 years ago and was given a proper burial. Sophia's hands turned cold. They're covering it up. Daniel nodded. Whoever they are, they don't want people asking questions. Sophia's mind raced. But, why erase the truth now? After so many years? Daniel exhaled. Because Ethan came back. The unmarked grave. Sophia and Daniel drove in tense silence. She had one question that wouldn't leave her mind. If Ethan was buried, whose grave was it? They pulled into an old cemetery. Daniel led her past rows of headstones, stopping at a small, unmarked grave. Sophia's chest tightened. Is this? Daniel nodded. This is where Ethan Carter is supposed to be. Sophia's breath hitched. The grave was fresh. Someone had recently dug here. She turned to Daniel. What do we do? His eyes darkened. We find out who's buried here. Before Sophia could answer, her phone buzzed. Another unknown message. You're getting too close. Leave now. Or you'll join him underground. A twig snapped behind them. Sophia turned sharply. A figure stood among the graves. Tall. Still. Watching. Then. They vanished. Gone. Like they had never been there. Sophia clutched Daniel's arm. What if Ethan didn't come back? Daniel's jaw tensed. Then something else did. The world around them felt still. Sophia's breath came in shallow gasps as she scanned the graveyard. The figure had disappeared. But the feeling of being watched remained. Daniel's grip tightened on her wrist. We need to leave. Sophia shook her head. No. We came to find answers. We can't run now. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. Okay. But we need to be smart. They crouched near the grave, their hands brushing against the damp earth. It was fresh. Someone had disturbed it recently. Daniel pulled a small flashlight from his pocket and shined it over the grave. Sophia's stomach twisted. The soil had been moved. Someone had been here. And they had either buried something, or taken something out. The unearthed secret. Daniel exhaled sharply. I need to see what's inside. Sophia grabbed his arm. You're not digging up a grave. Daniel turned to her, eyes dark. Sophia, we need to know who's in there. She swallowed hard. Every instinct told her this was wrong. But so was everything that had happened since she saved that boy. Something wasn't right. Sophia clenched her jaw. Fine. But if we get caught, I'm blaming you. Daniel smirked. Fair. With a deep breath, he reached for a nearby branch and started scraping away the loose soil. The deeper he went, the stronger the scent of rotting earth filled the air. Sophia covered her mouth, her stomach twisting. Then. A dull thud. Daniel froze. Sophia's heart slammed against her ribs. What is it? Daniel cleared away the last layer of dirt. Then they saw it. A small, decayed wooden coffin. Sophia's skin crawled. It was child-sized. She shivered. Is it Ethan? Daniel didn't answer. He reached down and carefully pried the lid open. The wood groaned in protest. And then, Sophia gasped. Inside the coffin was a set of neatly folded clothes. A tiny blue jacket. A pair of small sneakers. But no body. Just an old, water-damaged photo. Daniel picked it up, turning it toward the moonlight. Sophia felt her blood run cold. The photo was of Ethan Carter. But the date on the back. It was taken yesterday. The message in the dirt. Sophia backed away. This doesn't make sense. If Ethan drowned years ago, how is there a picture of him taken yesterday? Daniel stared at the photo, his knuckles turning white. Unless someone wants us to think he's still out there. Sophia glanced around, heart racing. Or, what if he really is? Before Daniel could respond, her phone vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out. Another unknown number. The message was just one word. Run. Her stomach dropped. She looked up at Daniel, ready to tell him. Then she saw it. In the dirt beside the coffin. Footprints. Small ones. And they were fresh. Leading away from the grave. Like someone had just walked out of it. Sophia's vision blurred with panic. Daniel, we need to go. Now. A branch snapped behind them. They turned. A shadow moved between the headstones. Not running. Not hiding. Watching. Then. A child's voice whispered through the night. You shouldn't have saved me. The voice sent ice through Sophia's veins. She spun around, scanning the graveyard. Nothing. Only shadows. Daniel grabbed her wrist, his voice barely above a whisper. Did you hear that? Sophia's throat felt dry. It sounded like a child. Daniel swallowed hard. It sounded like Ethan. Sophia's pulse pounded in her ears. But how? She had seen Ethan nearly drown. She had pulled him from the water. She had seen his mother hold him, cry over him, take him away. So why did it feel like he had never left? The air turned cold. A sudden gust of wind rushed past them, making the trees sway. The leaves rustled like whispers, surrounding them, enclosing them. Then. Another sound. Footsteps. Soft. Small. Like a child walking barefoot on the grass. Sophia turned toward the grave. The footprints were still there, but now they were longer. Like someone had walked further away. Leading into the trees. Daniel grabbed her arm. We're not following them. Sophia exhaled. Then what do we do? Just walk away? Daniel didn't answer. He was staring at something. Sophia followed his gaze. Near one of the headstones, half hidden in the shadows. A figure. Small. Still. Watching. Sophia's chest tightened. She took a step forward. The figure moved. Just slightly. Enough for the moonlight to fall on its face. Sophia froze. It was a boy. Dark hair. Hollow eyes. A small, blue jacket. The same jacket she had pulled Ethan out of the lake wearing. The same jacket that had been in the coffin just moments ago. The haunting question. Sophia's breath came out shaky. Ethan? The boy didn't answer. He only tilted his head. Daniel took a cautious step forward. Who are you? A long silence. Then. The boy smiled. A slow, unsettling smile. Sophia's stomach twisted. Daniel took a sharp breath. That's not Ethan. Sophia barely heard him. Her legs felt weak. She had seen that face before. The same face on the missing child flyers. The same face from the old photograph in the coffin. Ethan Carter. The boy who had drowned. The boy she had saved. But now. The boy who shouldn't be here. The warning. A sharp pain shot through Sophia's skull. A pressure, like something pushing into her mind. The wind howled. The graveyard felt smaller. The boy took a step closer. Daniel yanked Sophia back. We're leaving. But Sophia couldn't move. The boy's lips parted. And this time, when he spoke, the words felt like they came from everywhere. You shouldn't have saved me. Sophia's body tensed. Why? The boy's dark eyes flickered. His smile widened. Because now I belong to you. The wind slammed against them. Daniel pulled Sophia's arm. Run. This time, she didn't argue. They turned and bolted through the graveyard. Branches scratched at their arms. Their breath came in ragged gasps. Behind them. The boy laughed. Not the laughter of a child. Something else. Something wrong. Sophia dared one last glance back. The boy was gone. Only the footprints remained. Leading away from the grave. Sophia and Daniel ran without looking back. The graveyard blurred around them, the headstones, the rustling trees, the cold night air pressing against their skin. They didn't stop until they reached the car. Daniel yanked the door open, practically shoving Sophia inside. He jumped into the driver's seat, turned the key, and the engine roared to life. But just as he shifted into gear. Thud. Something hit the trunk. Hard. Sophia gasped. What was that? Daniel's knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. We're leaving. He slammed his foot on the gas. The tires screeched, kicking up gravel as the car sped out of the cemetery gates. The road ahead was dark, winding, stretching into the empty night. Neither of them spoke. The only sound was their heavy breathing. Sophia's heart pounded against her ribs. Daniel's jaw was clenched, his hands gripping the wheel so tightly his fingers shook. That wasn't real. Sophia swallowed. Then what was it? Daniel didn't answer. Because they both knew, something was real. And whatever it was, it had followed them. The message on the window. They didn't stop driving until they reached Sophia's house. The moment they stepped inside, Sophia locked the door behind them. Daniel paced the living room, running a hand through his hair. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. We saw Ethan leave with his mother. We saw the coffin in the grave. So who, or what, was that? Sophia shivered. He knew my name, Daniel. He knew I saved him. Daniel exhaled sharply. That's the part that scares me. Sophia walked toward the window and pulled the curtain aside. The street outside was quiet, empty. But then. Her breath caught. A handprint. On the glass. Small. Like a child's. A cold wave of fear rushed through her. Daniel. He turned, following her gaze. His face paled. That wasn't there before. Sophia's throat tightened. She reached out slowly, her fingers barely brushing against the glass. The lights flickered. The air turned cold. Then, the handprint disappeared. Like it had never been there. A shiver ran down her spine. We need answers. Daniel nodded. We need to find Ethan's mother. The mother's secret. It took them hours to track her down. Ethan's mother, Margaret Carter, had moved to a small town outside the city. They drove in silence, each lost in their thoughts. What if she didn't believe them? What if she did? They reached her house just after sunset. It was a modest home, tucked between tall, swaying trees. A single porch light flickered above the front door. Sophia hesitated before knocking. Footsteps approached. The door opened. Margaret stood there, her eyes sunken, her face pale and tired. She blinked at them, confused. Sophia? Sophia swallowed. We need to talk. Margaret's grip on the door tightened. It's about Ethan, isn't it? Sophia's heart skipped. You know? Margaret let out a shaky breath. She stepped aside. Come in. They walked in, the air thick with unspoken words. Margaret sat on the couch, wringing her hands. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying for days. I never wanted to talk about this, she whispered. But if you're here, then it's already started. Sophia's stomach clenched. What started? Margaret looked up, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan wasn't supposed to come back. Daniel frowned. But I saved him. Margaret's lips trembled. You don't understand. She wiped at her eyes. The lake, it's cursed. It doesn't just take. Sometimes, it gives back. Sophia felt cold. Gives back? Margaret nodded slowly. Ethan drowned that day. He was gone. But then you pulled him out. And when I looked into his eyes, something wasn't right. Daniel stiffened. Are you saying? Margaret gripped Sophia's hands. Her fingers were ice cold. That thing you saved, wasn't my son. Sophia's breath hitched. Margaret's eyes darkened. And now it wants you, too. The room fell into silence. Outside, the wind howled. Then, a knock at the door. Soft. Rhythmic. Like tiny fingers tapping against the wood. Sophia's blood ran cold, the knocking didn't stop. Tap. 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 Soft. Steady. Childlike. Sophia's breath hitched. She exchanged a terrified glance with Daniel, whose face was frozen with tension. Margaret's grip tightened on Sophia's wrist. Don't open it, she whispered again, her voice shaking. The tapping grew more insistent. Faster. Harder. Then, the doorknob turned. Sophia stumbled back, her pulse hammering. It was trying to get in. Daniel jumped to his feet, ready to bolt, but Margaret remained deathly still. Her eyes were wide with fear, but her expression was one of grim acceptance. Sophia clenched her fists. Enough. She took a slow step toward the door. Sophia, no. Margaret hissed. But Sophia needed to see. She had to know. She reached out and, with a trembling hand, yanked the curtain aside. No one was there. Her breath came out in ragged gasps. The street was empty. The trees swayed in the cold wind, their branches casting eerie shadows. But then, her stomach twisted. The handprint. It was back. Pressed against the glass. Small. Wet. And this time, it moved. A faint, smudged line trailed down, like tiny fingers dragging against the window. Sophia staggered back. Oh my God. A whisper, right behind her ear. You saved me, now save yourself. Sophia spun, nothing. But Margaret's face had gone pale. We need to end this, she said, voice hoarse. Before it takes you too. Daniel clenched his jaw. How? Margaret inhaled deeply. We have to go back. To the lake. The truth beneath the water. The drive back felt surreal. The road was empty, the night too quiet. Margaret sat in the back seat, staring blankly ahead. "I should have told you earlier," she said. "The lake isn't just cursed, it's a doorway." Sophia shuddered. A doorway to what? Margaret swallowed hard. To something that doesn't belong here. Daniel tightened his grip on the steering wheel. And Ethan? Margaret's voice was barely above a whisper. He drowned. But something else came back in his place. A cold silence settled in the car. Sophia felt sick. Had she saved something that was never meant to live? The lake loomed ahead, dark and still. They parked near the water's edge. The air was heavy, damp. Margaret stepped forward first. She held out a small object, a locket. Sophia frowned. "What's that?" Margaret's voice trembled. "Ethan's." She bent down and dropped it into the lake. The water rippled unnaturally. Then, a whispering sound. Low. Hollow. Like voices trapped beneath the surface. Sophia's skin prickled. The water churned. Something was rising. A shape. Small. Childlike. Ethan. Or at least, what looked like him. But his eyes. Black. Empty. Wrong. He smiled. "You came back." Sophia's breath caught. Margaret stepped forward. "You don't belong here." Ethan tilted his head. His smile widened. "But she saved me." His voice echoed. "And now, she has to take my place." Sophia's blood turned ice cold. The water lashed out, hands, dozens of them, reaching, grasping. Margaret shoved Sophia back. "Run." But it was too late. A hand wrapped around Sophia's ankle. Cold. Slimy. Pulling her in. The world flipped. 1 second, Sophia was standing on the shore. The next, she was underwater. Darkness surrounded her. She struggled, kicking, twisting, but the hands wouldn't let go. Shapes moved around her. Shadows with hollow eyes. A voice echoed through the water. "You don't belong here either." Sophia's lungs burned. Her vision blurred. Was she drowning? No, something was taking her. Then. A flash of gold. Margaret's locket, sinking past her. Sophia reached for it instinctively. The moment her fingers touched it, a shockwave burst through the water. The hands recoiled. The shadows shrieked. Sophia felt her body lurch, and then she was free. She kicked upward, gasping. And broke through the surface. Daniel grabbed her arms, yanking her onto the shore. She coughed violently, her lungs heaving for air. Margaret stood at the edge of the lake, clutching something in her hands. The locket was open. Inside. A photo of Ethan. A real Ethan. Not the thing from the water. Margaret's face was streaked with tears. "I love you, baby," she whispered. Then. She stepped forward. And walked into the lake. Sophia screamed. "Margaret, no." The water swallowed her whole. Then. Stillness. The lake turned calm. The air felt lighter. Sophia's chest tightened. She took slow, shaky breaths. Daniel wrapped an arm around her, steadying her. And then. The first light of dawn broke over the trees. It was over. The thing from the lake was gone. Margaret had made the final sacrifice. Sophia's throat ached. She felt like crying, but no tears came. Daniel exhaled sharply. "Let's go home." Sophia nodded. But as they walked away, she swore she heard something. A faint, distant whisper carried by the wind. "Thank you for saving me." Dive deeper into the history of the lake and its origins. Was it always cursed? The lake was once a peaceful, sacred place, but centuries ago, something dark entered its waters, changing everything. Explore the folklore surrounding the lake, how local villagers believed the creature was an ancient guardian that became corrupted by an unknown force. Perhaps the creature was a spirit, a guardian of the lake, who fell victim to a dark curse and was trapped in the water, feeding off the fear of anyone who approached. A local historian or elder who holds more information about the lake's true power could be introduced. The creature's true form. Reveal more details about the creature, how it manipulates those around it, feeding off their fear and emotions. The entity may be more than just a physical creature, perhaps it is connected to a deep, ancient magic. Margaret's role: she may have unknowingly activated the creature's power by wearing the locket, and her connection to the lake was sealed. The dark force behind the creature, whether it's a malevolent spirit, an ancient curse, or a human ritual gone wrong. The real impact on Margaret's family. Explore Margaret's sacrifice in more detail, showing the emotional toll it took on her family, particularly Ethan, or the memory of him. Flashbacks that show her growing attachment to the lake and her growing realization of the dark force at work. The burden she carried, knowing that her family would be at risk if she didn't make the ultimate choice. The scene where Margaret gives Sophia the locket before walking into the lake could be expanded. Perhaps Margaret says a prayer or a message to her family. Sophia's growing understanding. Sophia's growing realization that her connection to the lake and its mystery runs deeper than she first thought. She may begin experiencing strange dreams or visions related to the lake and its creature. Daniel's increasing concern for Sophia's well-being: he feels that the lake still holds power over her. Sophia and Daniel's relationship becomes strained as they try to move on, but the lingering presence of the lake's curse begins to affect their lives. A new discovery. As the characters try to move forward, they uncover a new clue or piece of the puzzle, a hidden letter, a journal entry, or a local legend about the lake that wasn't fully revealed before. This discovery hints at the possibility that Margaret's sacrifice may not have been enough to break the curse entirely. Cliffhanger. The last line of the section could end with a chilling moment. Perhaps Sophia sees something moving beneath the lake's surface, or she feels a strange pull to return to the water. The idea that Margaret's sacrifice may not have truly ended the creature's reign could be introduced. Sophia stood at the edge of the lake, her breath heavy in her chest, her heart pounding in a rhythm she couldn't control. It had been weeks since Margaret's sacrifice, but the unsettling feeling never left her. She had tried to move on. She had tried to put the past behind her and embrace the normal life she once knew. But the whispers still lingered. The strange dreams, the soft pull toward the water, they were impossible to ignore. Daniel stood beside her, his face marked with concern, his eyes scanning the serene yet unnervingly still water. He had tried, more than once, to convince Sophia to leave it all behind, to return to the world outside the lake's cursed influence. But Sophia couldn't. She couldn't escape the feeling that there was something more, something deeper, still unresolved. She had to know. "I don't want you to do this," Daniel said, his voice thick with worry. He reached out, taking her hand. "You heard the elder. Margaret's sacrifice should have broken the curse. The lake should be safe," Sophia finished for him, her voice a whisper of doubt. "I know what she said. But something doesn't feel right. Daniel, I keep hearing her voice, faintly, like she's calling me. It's like the lake is calling me." Daniel's grip tightened. He didn't want to admit it, but he had felt it too, the strange presence in the air, the eerie sensation that something still lingered beneath the surface of the water. But he had hoped, with all his heart, that it was just their minds playing tricks, a lingering fear from what they had witnessed. But Sophia was determined. And he couldn't turn his back on her now. They stood there for a long time, staring at the placid surface of the lake, as if waiting for something to happen, for the water to reveal its secrets. The early morning fog had not yet lifted, and the air was damp and cold. A shiver ran down Sophia's spine, but she didn't move. Her eyes remained fixed on the water, as though it held the answers to everything she had been wondering about for weeks. "I think I need to go in," she said, her voice barely audible. "What?" Daniel's tone was a mix of shock and fear. "Sophia, no. You're not going back in there. You saw what it did to Margaret. To all of us. We can't go back." But Sophia didn't respond. She had made up her mind. She felt a pull stronger than anything she had ever known, a magnetic force drawing her closer to the water, to the very heart of the lake where the creature had once lurked. She had to understand it. She had to know if Margaret's sacrifice had truly ended everything, or if they were all still doomed. Without another word, Sophia began walking toward the water. Daniel followed her, his heart heavy with dread. He had never seen her so determined, so certain. He knew better than to try and stop her now. As they reached the water's edge, the silence became suffocating. The lake seemed to stretch endlessly in front of them, its depths impenetrable. The stillness was unnerving, there were no birds, no movement, not even the faintest ripple on the surface. It was as if the lake itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. Sophia kneeled beside the water, her fingers grazing the cool surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, almost imperceptibly, a dark shape stirred beneath the water. She blinked, her heart skipping a beat. Was it just her imagination, or had something moved beneath the surface? "Did you see that?" she whispered, her voice quivering. Daniel frowned. He couldn't see anything. "Sophia, stop it. There's nothing there." But Sophia wasn't convinced. She closed her eyes, and for a brief moment, she thought she heard it, a faint, soft whisper, carried by the wind. A voice that seemed to come from the very heart of the lake. It was Margaret's voice, wasn't it? She strained to hear it more clearly, but the words were just out of reach. Sophia's breath quickened. She could feel her pulse pounding in her ears. She had to get closer. She had to know the truth. Before Daniel could stop her, she waded into the water. The chill of the lake sent a shiver through her body, but she didn't care. She was determined. She pushed forward, her feet sinking into the soft, muddy bottom. The water was rising higher, now to her knees, then her waist, as she made her way deeper. Daniel was on the shore, shouting her name, pleading for her to stop. But she couldn't turn back. Her vision began to blur as she entered the deeper water. The lake's surface seemed to shimmer, as though it was alive, pulsing with an energy she couldn't explain. Her hands reached out, fingers grazing the water's surface. For a moment, she felt as though she was being embraced by something unseen, something ancient and powerful. And then, as if from nowhere, a figure appeared before her. A woman, pale and ghostly, her eyes hollow and searching. It was Margaret. Sophia froze, her heart racing in her chest. "Margaret," she whispered, barely able to speak. The figure nodded, slowly, solemnly. Her eyes were filled with a mixture of sadness and relief. But there was something else in her gaze, a sense of urgency, a warning. Margaret opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Instead, her hand moved, pointing downward, toward the depths of the lake. Sophia's eyes followed her gesture. The water beneath her feet seemed to shift, swirling as though something huge was moving beneath the surface. A low, guttural growl echoed from the depths, and Sophia felt the ground tremble beneath her. "No, no, this can't be happening again," she muttered to herself. But deep down, she knew. The creature wasn't gone. It was still there, still lurking, still waiting. With a sudden, violent motion, the figure of Margaret faded, her form dissipating into the mist that had begun to roll in over the lake. Sophia gasped, her chest tightening. The water around her began to rise, rushing upward as though the lake itself were reclaiming her. She fought to stay upright, but her legs weakened beneath her, and she was pulled under. The creature, the dark presence she had feared, was real. It was back, and it had no intention of letting her go. Cliffhanger. The last thing Sophia saw before the water closed over her head was a pair of glowing eyes, watching her from the depths. They were not the eyes of the creature she had seen before, but something new, something even darker. And then, there was only silence.